The screen sharing for me so that I can share the slides.
Yeah. Yeah. It has been enabled, so please share your screen.
So last 2 decades, we have seen phenomenal change in the way property is developed, invested, owned, and used. There have been a number of market disruptors that are changing the face of real estate. One we saw very recently during the COVID-19 times, while the industry was discussing about the work from home for a very long time, just overnight, everything shifted in the direction where we experimented and we did that successfully, which is to work from home. And one of the example is this particular conference, which is happening online, where all of us are sitting in numerous countries at numerous places, but we have been connected in a very convenient and nice manner. So what I'm going to talk about today is the market disruptors and the future of real estate. What have we learned? The three questions that we will be looking at. The first question is, what are the major disruptors that are affecting the real estate market? Second, how real estate market is adapting to the changes in human behavior. The third, how will real estate evolve to accommodate future innovation and consumer demand? The structure of my talk would comprise the following. First, I will talk about the three major disruptors. Right. So hopefully you can see this now. So the talk would then move in the direction of one of the major disruptors, which is technology and how it is impacting on the real estate. Earlier, we heard from architect Dick Cruz, where he was talking about sustainability and the resilience and the role of these in the way the development planning is moving. So some of the technology is also taking us in the direction of adapting much more energy efficient or sustainable technologies for smart buildings. I'll also very briefly talk about the blockchain technology, which is going to impact on the real estate market quite significantly, and we see that already, and what this all means for the real estate. So the three major disruptors. The first one is the demographics. Now, this is a very interesting shift that has happened over the last 2 decades, the rise of millennials. So these are the guys who were born between 1980 and mid 1990s, would be around 30 to 40 years of age now. They entered the workforce 10 years ago. They comprise about 1.8 million people worldwide, or the 23% of global population. Now, the interesting aspect of the millennials is that they are highly educated. More than 25% of the millennials have education which is higher than secondary education, which is very different than the previous generation. They are not evenly distributed. A large proportion of them, roughly about 1 billion, live in Asia, particularly in emerging markets of China and India. So how are millennials different? The first thing is that their level of education is much higher than the previous generation. So they are far more aware. They are far more tech savvy, because they were the generation who came, who coincided with the technology revolution that happened somewhere around 1980s, 90s and peaked after 2000. Another interesting aspect of millennial is that more women than men have post-secondary education. So we have a major segment which is entering into the workforce, which in the earlier generation was staying away from the workforce. The participation of women is right from the grassroots to the very top level. What is also happening is the delay in family formation and childbearing, because many of these women are entering into the workforce, which then is causing the family formation to be delayed. There is less certain or clear career development among millennials. They are far more risk taking. They are excited about trying new things or entrepreneurial activities. They are more individualistic or entertainment focused. Their values are different than the previous generation. The life stage without family commitment impacts on saving, their inheritance motives, their consumption and travel behavior. And all this is changing their attitude towards ownership of real estate. The second disruptor is the globalization or the rise of capital. Now, we see huge chunk of capital being transferred across countries, and one of the largest recipient of capital is real estate. Now, earlier, real estate used to be a local asset, but now we see the global investors investing in asset which is far away from their place of residence. Now, what it does is that it delinks the real estate market from the economy of a country, because the capital can flow freely anywhere from anywhere. And that is causing a significant impact on the cycles in property market. Cities such as New York, London, LA, Berlin, these were the initial attractors of international capital. But now we see that many of the emerging world cities like Mumbai or Shanghai also attracting huge amount of capital. How globalization manifests itself, there are three levels of manifestation. One is economic globalization, wherein the goods and services, as well as capital, they move across borders. There are a number of different institutions which have developed at the national and organization level. But what it is also doing, it is changing the preferences at the consumer level. There is a universalization of consumer preferences in terms of the kind of goods that consumers want. The second manifestation of globalization is in political processes, where the ideologies across different geographies are in some way aligning or coinciding. Here again, there are impacts at the organization as well as personal level. The attitude towards sustainability, it's a global phenomenon. The activism for the human rights is again a global phenomenon. The third manifestation of globalization is in social trends. These are based on the beliefs of the society. Again, they are aligning. And many of the social media, as we are all familiar with, the Facebook or the Twitters of the day, they have become quite important in transferring these ideas across border. The third disruptor is the technology, which is leading to the rise of new structure. And the interesting aspect is when the demographics, globalization, and technology, they collide, it creates an interesting pattern. And that's what we are observing. And that's what is affecting real estate. So technology, some of the technology is endogenous to real estate, which is created for and by the real estate market. We have a number of examples. Airbnb. Now, Airbnb is a technological revolution in which the hospitality industry works. I'll talk about this a little more later in my talk. The second is WeWork, which is co-working platform, which has changed in the way we work. Third is Proptech. This is an India-based Proptech, which is for listing of properties. The fourth is August, which is a data-driven software technology, which has eased in the way the information can be converted into decision-making tool. Then there are those technologies which are exogenous to real estate, They're not created for or by the real estate market, but they are impacting on real estate. One of the biggest nightmare today for the developers is the evolution or the development of autonomous cars. Most of the buildings, and some of you who are planners, they know that there are planning requirements to have car parking spaces in the building. They are mandated. Now, if you think about it, each car has three places or three spaces occupied for them. One is at home, another is at office, and one is maybe at the retail. Now, if autonomous cars, they become the norm, what will happen to these parking spaces? Now, many of these parking spaces cannot be converted for anything else. Like, for example, if there is a parking within a building with low ceiling height and slopes, it cannot be converted easily for anything else. You cannot demolish the building either and rebuild it. The reason is because the rest of the building stands on this parking space. So what will happen in the future if autonomous cars become a norm? And it's happening very quickly. Aurora is a startup which is developing autonomous car technology and has collaborated with Toyota and other car manufacturers. The second important development which happened exogenous to the real estate market was the development of online payment technology such as PayPal, which led to the whole revolution of e-commerce. Now, e-commerce has made huge chunk of retail space dysfunctional. A lot of commerce, as we have seen during the COVID-19 time, is happening online. And this is going to grow as we go forward. The third, which is going to be the biggest disruptor, is the blockchain. Now, the blockchain technology is already showing some promising sign and breaking down some of the barriers which earlier used to impact the transactions. I'll come to that in a moment. So my focus today will be on technology and how it is impacting on property market and what we call it as Proptech. So Proptech is different than Fintech, or the technology that is used in capital markets and finance. And there are three major components of Proptech. One is the smart real estate. These are all smart buildings. The second is real estate Fintech. This to some extent overlaps with the Fintech, but these are the technologies that are used in the real estate. Like, for example, the mortgage, online mortgage apps, or the leasing apps, or the buying and selling apps. All these are real estate Fintech. The third element of Proptech is the shared economy. Now, this is the most interesting one. Some part of shared economies is outside Proptech space, like, for example, Uber or Ola, which are the transportation solution. They are not part of Proptech, but there is also a shared economy which is emerging and developing quite fast through, say, Airbnb or WeWork and similar other platform, which is part of Proptech and is affecting property markets quite significantly. This is the map of Proptech in India. And you'll be surprised to see here that there are huge number of companies which have emerged in the last 5 to 10 years. They relate to sharing economy, they relate to residential market listing, they relate to construction technology, though Proptech and construction technology, they are slightly different. And I won't be talking about construction technology or Contech, but rather focus more on Proptech. Then there are sales and marketing, hospitality, and so on. So this map is growing by the day. So let me first talk about smart building. What is a smart building? A smart building uses a range of technology such as sensors or actuators to gather activity data on various aspects that happen within a building so that it can be analyzed and utilized to find out which operation can run more efficiently. There are a number of reasons why investors and developers are looking at smart building, because it saves cost, it's energy efficient, it also impacts on the well-being of productivity of the users of that space. The second is the real estate fintech. Now, real estate fintech is interesting because it supports all transactions of real estate assets. Now, there are some poster boys there like Zillow, Zoopla, Land Investor, Open Door there. But what is more interesting that is happening is fintech is also becoming a platform for equity raising for different kind of development. The crowdfunding and equity raising is becoming increasingly important activity of real estate fintech. There are a number of organizations like StrideUp. StrideUp works in a very interesting way. Now, what for a homeowner who wants to buy, let's say, a property, they need a mortgage. But suppose they find it difficult to raise a mortgage or they don't want to raise a mortgage. So they can access equity which has been sourced through crowdfunding through StrideUp in order to buy the property. Now, of course, any gains, whether it be a capital gains or if it's a rental income, would be shared amongst different equity partners. But it allows that kind of mechanism through which the equity could be raised through the crowdfunding. Then there are also disposal and secondary market exchanges. These are for buying and selling of properties. Open Door is an interesting example. Now, usually if you think buying or selling a property takes many months. In a traditional way, it will at least take 2 to 3 months because there are a huge amount of search and time cost involved. So what Open Door does is that if you want to sell a property, if you sell it through Open Door, what they say, you can sell it to them at a price which they offer you, or you can list with them to sell it to some other investor. So this saves the time. This also saves the cost. Knock is another platform that has emerged in this space. The third one, which is very interesting, is the shared economy. Now, the sharing economy is also referred to as collaborative consumption or access economy, which is built on an economic philosophy that space and capital goods are better shared. Many of the assets that companies own or we own are used only for part of the time. The rest of the time is just sitting idle. One could capitalize on the time when it's not being used by sharing it with others, of course, for a rent. The cost of purchasing the good or service is not borne by an individual, but instead is divided across a large group and recouped through renting or exchanging. We talked about demographic shift or the millennials. The millennials don't believe in owning an asset. They would rather rent it and use it. There are a number of examples here. In transportation, we have Uber, Ola, or Zipcar. In real estate, we have Airbnb as well as ShareDesk. ShareDesk is for office space sharing. And then we have for storage and parking examples like Roost, Share My Storage, or StoreMates. Or for retail, we have VR Pop-up. So these are some of those share economies based solution or based platform that have emerged over the last 10 years or maybe 12 years. Like Airbnb came on horizon in 2008. WeWork came on horizon in 2011. So they are very recent origins. What are the factors that are behind the rise of share economy? One is technology. most of these are shared, are supported by technological revolution. The second is economic, the high cost of owning an asset, high cost of owning a property. The more the shift in attitude towards savings, the political instability, which has given rise to entrepreneurship and given the power to many companies who have become much bigger than many of the economies. And the social change is largely driven by the values that millennials, who are 25% of the total population, espouse today. So these are the factors which have led to rise in the shared economy. Now let me talk about Airbnb and what it has done and what were the conditions under which such kind of models evolve. So Airbnb, it created a platform for homeowners to profit from their underused space. Now think of a hotel chain. If they want to increase supply, they will need to buy a building, which is expensive and time consuming. While Airbnb can cheaply increase the supply overnight. Airbnb doesn't own any physical asset, which protects the company from any liabilities. There are no deterioration, there are no real estate taxes to be paid, there is no capital market risk. It's a very asset-light model which expanded in last 10 years. What are the conditions that are required here for such kind of product or such kind of model to emerge? One is that you need a widely distributed source of demand. Exactly that's what we had in the hospitality industry. We had demand for short stay hospitality. We need a diverse and widely distributed heterogeneous sources of supply. Rooms in different locations, in different cities, in different countries. There shouldn't be any dominant or efficient mechanism for bringing demand and supply together. We didn't have that in hotel industry. It was very inefficient. You had to go to each hotel's website in order to book, or even those early incarnation of hotel booking platform like booking.com or Trivago or some of those. It used to be time consuming. The potential financial gains should belong to suppliers, demand, as well as the intermediary, which in this case is Airbnb, and it should be scalable. So all these conditions are necessary and they existed for this model. If we look at some of the performance statistics, the growth is phenomenal. There are over 150 million users worldwide. 6 guests check in Airbnb every second. The average nightly rate is $185 with average stay of 4.3. Now, what is interesting here is that 54% of Airbnb guests are female, and 58% of host and booking guests are millennials. The average revenue, the yearly revenue in 2018 was 3.6 billion. And their valuation, the Airbnb's valuation was about 38 billion, which of course after COVID plummeted quite substantially, but still significant or substantial valuation for a data-based company. So what Airbnb is doing to the traditional housing market? Now, there is a study by Baron Kung and Prosperio in Harvard Business Review, where they say that 1% increase in Airbnb listing increases the rents by 0.018% and house prices by 0.026%. Now you would say it's minor, but think about it. The listings are increasing at the rate of 44% each year. So we are talking about roughly 5% increase in rents just because of Airbnb listing, and about 8% increase in house value on an yearly basis because of Airbnb. There's a significant impact. Now, these guys also find that zip codes where there was higher owner occupancy rates, they were not affected by Airbnb. So most of the space that becomes available on Airbnb is that which is unused. And Airbnb is also affecting housing market through relocation of housing stock. What does it mean for property and planning profession? One is the regulation. How do you regulate this industry? This is totally unchecked. It's difficult. Second is valuation for property professional. Whether it should be valued as property, whether it should be valued as a business. It's a difficult, it's a challenge. When you value a house, whether you should be looking at from the point of view of a business or should you be valuing it based on traditional methods. The second interesting model is the co-working model. Co-working model has been in existence for many years in some form or other since 1959 as early incubators, which was a space which one could rent. The idea was to stimulate commerce by grouping together small businesses. Later incarnation of incubators also provided business assistance and financing opportunities. This model continued for a very long time. In 1999, after 40 years since the early incubators, a new type of model emerged for co-working, which was innovation centers. These provided office space and services for young companies, generally tech startups. And the idea there again was commercialization of innovation and entrepreneurship. Then by mid or early 2000, the accelerator model came up. These are programming based workplaces, which were designed to help startup companies grow more rapidly by providing them technical and educational assistance, mentoring, and network opportunities and workspaces. So these were some of those early models. Then came the co-working center, which was a revolutionary idea. It was a membership-based, interdisciplinary space where workers and startup companies could locate. And the focus was on a flexibility in terms of space use, space and time use, as well as the services that the co-working companies provided. WeWork is the poster boy of co-working. However, recently WeWork is in trouble. It has been in trouble because of the model that that co-working companies adopted. They had on one side, on the liability side, they had a long-term leases. So they leased spaces from different landlords, which were long-term leases. That's the structure of the market. While they leased it out or rented it out on a short-term basis, as short as maybe 1 month to 3 months. So there was this asset liability mismatch. When the economy is doing well, everything is fine. These companies make huge amount of money. But when the economies turn around, then there is a problem. So since then, a number of different models have also emerged. Now, this particular slide here shows different model structures for co-working company. On the horizontal axis, we have risk, and on the vertical axis, we have return. So the more risk for the company and the more return for the company. And there are these different models. So lease model is highly risky model because there are significant upfront cost. And in the initial periods, when they are looking for more clients or more tenants, there are some significant negative initial cash flows. While for the owners of those spaces, there are minimal risk as their cash flows are certain because these co-working companies pays them rents. The other model is the joint venture model, which has higher return and low risk. And this is one of the models which even WeWork is talking about today, wherein they get into a joint venture with the owner of space, property owners, and both share the risk as well as return. The large investment is of property owners and a smaller investment is of co-working company. Then there are management model, wherein all capital and operational investment is made by the property owners, and co-working companies, they have the management contract to operate and manage the property. Then there are some new models coming up, which is one is franchisee model, very similar to hotels, where all investment and operation is by the owners. And as the franchisee, the owner also pays some kind of royalty to co-working company to use their brand. Here the risk is high and the return is also high. Then there are owner-operator model. WeWork is also thinking in this direction that they would start owning the properties rather than leasing from another landlord. So here's a co-working company, they buy property, or owners start CWC. Either they buy the properties, or if there's a property owner, they start their co-working company. Here risk and return both are high. Now, what is interesting is to step back and think what co-working companies are doing to the traditional office development and investment. If we recall, the way the office market operates in traditional sense is that there is a developer who builds a property which is sold to an investor who then leases it out to different tenants. The tenant covenant play a very important role. The blue chip tenants who are willing to lease that space for a longer period are valued higher by the market. But when the co-working companies, they lease it out to startups, entrepreneurs who need flexibility, who want short-term leases. That changes the whole market dynamics. Now, what are the challenges for CWC model? There's a high tenant risk. There's a high debt obligation. There are unpredictable lease structures. All these characteristics, to some extent, we find in hotel real estate. So there is significant systematic risk here. There's also high economic risk because they move with economic cycle. Now, if there's a landlord, if they were to lease their property to blue chip tenants versus a CWCs, there is a dilemma there. But many of the landlords are preferring to lease their property out to co-working companies because they see that the future is moving in that direction where the tenants would require shorter lease. They would require more flexibility. What it means for property and planning profession, first, how do you value the CWCs? Are they a data company or hotelisk service company or a real estate company? Despite high risk, why developers and investors are considering investing in CWCs? Because the market is moving in that direction. Another interesting and important change, which is bound to revolutionize the real estate market, is the blockchain. So what is a blockchain? Blockchain is a technology. It's essentially a digital ledger of transaction that is duplicated and distributed across entire network or computer system on the blockchain. Now, what blockchain does, it has the ability to execute transaction without an intermediary. This would suit perfectly well for real estate market. Now think of a property purchase. Who are involved there? There's a broker involved, there's a lawyer involved, there's a registration department involved. There are so many different entities who are involved in a simple transaction of a purchase of property. Now, suppose we can eliminate many of these intermediaries. This would not only be cost efficient, but also be time efficient. And why are these intermediaries involved? Because information in real estate is difficult to get by. So this blockchain could provide an alternative to International Property Stock Exchange, which is one of the platform through which properties are bought and sold, or the units and properties are bought and sold. So the distributed ledger, it holds a history of transaction, a property, an asset, or a title. It develops a digital secure identifier for a proposed transaction, and it offers an ability to transfer funds in new ways. For example, we are all familiar with Bitcoin. Secure, efficient, and smart contracts are some of the major impact of blockchain. Transparency between transactors, along with faster transaction and lower cost, are some of the benefits. To give you an example, I know that some of us would want to know how this blockchain works. And then I'll say that how it will work in real estate. And to some extent, it's happening already. Now, suppose John wants to transfer money to Michael. Let's say there's a digital currency which John wants to transfer to Michael. So what John does, John uses a digital wallet app to transfer money to Michael. The app stamps the transaction with John's digital signature, and this transaction needs to be verified by the blockchain that this is authentic and can be carried forward. So what happens then is that the John's transaction is grouped with other transactions that occur at the same time into a block. Now this block has a unique ID, the transaction time, and the ID of previous block in the chain. Now, this block containing John is then broadcast to entire network of blockchain to be verified. If the network okays it, then this moves forward, forming a permanent transparent record of transaction, and Michael gets his money. Now, interesting thing here is that the time consumed and the whole transaction is fraction of what happens in a money transfer today. Like, for example, if I were to transfer money through a traditional banking mode, I would instruct my bank will then transfer into their account in central bank, who will then transfer it to the central bank account of the recipient's bank, which will then go into the recipient's bank account. So it takes huge amount of time. All that is shortened through this blockchain, and there are no intermediaries, because in the traditional banking sense, there will be so many intermediaries and so many fees to be paid. So how it will work in the real estate context? And this is again something what millennials would want to, millennials desire. The reason is because of affordability and others. Now, suppose there are three individuals and they want to rent an office space. They are the startup companies who want an office space, but they don't have enough money to buy the full office for themselves. So Ada, Ben, and Charlie, they want to rent the office space, which is on the right hand. But given that they are startup, they will not be using that space throughout the month 24/7. So there is a time when this is unused. So what then happens is Anna, Ben, and Charlie, they elect to cooperatively own the office using some kind of distributed ledger technology-based system. So this takes in this happens in three phases. First, we would need to check whether Anna, Ben, and Charlie are credit worthy. So funding check and risk modeling would be performed on them using encrypted personal data sets to ensure the ability to collaboratively own that office. Now then a digital twin of the office is created on the ledger to represent the physical entity, which still is a challenge, but I'm sure that in next few years, this would also be a reality. And then the ownership of the office is partitioned into proportionate share and passed on to Anna, Ben, and Charlie. How will they use it? So there's the ownership where in proportionate to the equity, they own that office. Now, how the user consumption of services would work. So here, all three of them will hold a key that gives them access to office via a smart lock. Based on their share, They can book slots for the office in a shared calendar. Their shared based usage can be monitored via a smart contract. And once they reach their monthly quota, their key will be disabled. Now, all these things, like for example, the contract, smart contract, or allocation of time, that all can be done through blockchain. They can also negotiate via another smart contract and a side payment if they want to change their time of use. If, say, if Anna wants to use it more, she can pay to Ben and buy some of the time from what his allocation is. The maintenance of office can also be allocated to another smart contract amongst these three. And if they don't fulfill their obligation, the smart lock can be disabled. The faulty owner can be penalized by losing the usage time the following month. A ledger can additionally maintain an immutable record of office condition, which will be useful if this office has to be sold in the future. Or if, and it has to be insured. So insurer can access these records to assess the insurance cost for the office structure. So all this can be very easily incorporated within a blockchain system. So what is happening? Who is using blockchain and for what in real estate? Now we have seen some examples there, like Swedish Land Registry, and with some tech firm, ChromaWay or Kairos Future, have investigated the possibilities of using blockchain technology for real estate transactions. Bitfree and Estonian government, they are working together to secure land titles over a private network. Consensus and Dubai government, they are using blockchain strategies for public services and smart city connectivity. Ubiquity, Velox, and Propi are developing blockchain for title deed transparency. Deloitte, Netherlands, City of Rotterdam, they are doing it for lease agreements. So there are a number of these different opportunities within the real estate or where the blockchain can bring about efficiency, transparency, reduction in cost. There are, of course, limitations. For example, the same technology or shared primary home may not work because primary home has a very different purposes and there are limitations to which, though there is some discussion on co-living or shared living models, but I think it's still a long way away from becoming a reality. So what will not change in real estate? Now, one thing is there that real estate wears over time. There's a physical deterioration and there is obsolescence. And no technology would be able to solve this problem. But what will change? One is the design elements. This has a significant impact for architects. Design elements that enable innovation within the workplace. So the architectural brief would include that the workplace should be adaptable, ability to be nimble and adaptable, because the companies are becoming nimble. Companies are becoming flexible. Their requirements are changing on pretty much like a monthly basis. The second important design element would be connection, sharing spaces between different business functions and working groups that will allow for both cross-pollination, necessary to spawn innovation and collaboration and knowledge sharing. The third element that will become part of design is the lifestyle. The millennials don't look at workplace as a place to work and home as a place to go and relax. Rather, all these things are becoming intermingled. The workplaces are becoming places to live, work, and play. And when we look at the new spaces which Google or Facebook are designing, they are keeping millennials in mind. And these are the high paying jobs. When brought to city, as in the past, the middle income industrialization brought middle incomes to the city. Now, the millennials, which are high paying, or they are coming to a city who have very different values. The shared economy points to the need for shorter and more flexible leases. This changes the whole dynamics in which the real estate market operates. We would see more owner-operator landlords as co-working and co-living operators merge with traditional property owners to create, own, and operate multi-purpose, energy-efficient, and flexible spaces. We'll also see greater availability of information. Now that will have an impact on making the market more efficient and probably tapering the boom and bust nature of the office market. Valuation will change. So valuation of unitized property may become machine generated. So the whole profession of valuers would see a sea change. Shorter, more flexible leases may make real estate harder to value. And funding, we'll see more crowdfund funding platforms coming up, online secondary market platform, and blockchain. These will make transactions much more simpler and frequent. Online marketplaces, if successful, will allow real-time pricing, and they will introduce more volatility. In words of Mahatma Gandhi, when he said, "The future hinges on our action in present day," he was highlighting the difficulty of enacting future change without igniting a spark of some kind in the present. Today, we as built environment professionals are confronted with a slightly different conundrum. We are facing rapid fire change, whether we like it or not. The larger point, which still remains, is that inaction is still not a viable option. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Tiwari, for a very interesting and thought-provoking keynote in an area which is very relevant in modern times with the revolution, almost we can call it a revolution with Fintech moving into property and definitely affecting the housing sector. We would quickly now move on to our next keynote speaker. And thank you very much, Professor Tiwari, once again. And I would like to introduce our next keynote address speaker, Professor Marcus Square from Norway. Welcome, Marcus. Are you there with us?
Yes, I'm here. I'm not sure what to say. Good morning, good lunch, good evening.
It's now 12:30 afternoon, so I believe it's early morning there. So let me introduce you to all the participants from all across India who are listening online. Professor Marcus is Professor of Urban Design and Planning at the Department of Architecture and Planning at the Norwegian University of Science and Technology, and he's speaking from Trondheim. He is predominantly responsible for the education related to urban design and planning for all the students of architecture and planning in the university. And he is one of the lead researchers and has a considerable amount of work with the universities of the Western Balkan region of Europe, financed by the Norwegian Foreign Ministry. His predominant area of work is rethinking architecture and energy efficiency in buildings and urban development. He has been a part of several projects across Europe and particularly works at the municipality level. And he's now a part and the Norwegian leader in the Erasmus plus European Strategic Partnership on collective evaluation of design-driven doctoral training. With this brief introduction of Professor Marcus, I would now give the mic to you or stage to you, and you can please proceed, Marcus. Thank you for joining us early morning in Norway. Thank you very much. Please carry on.
Thank you very much. I hope you can hear me. I will try to share my screen.
Yes, you
You
are
just
audible.
have to confirm that you see.
Yes, we can see the screen and hear you.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much, Ion. Thank you very much, everyone involved. You know me from some years ago. I'm not very good in names. I really appreciate very much that you give me this possibility to talk to you. I also appreciate very much that I could listen to Professor Tiwari, because I am personally convinced that it's real estate which is the key to development. I'm, on the other hand, going to talk to you about another key which I would overall wise call behaviorism, or how we have to use this technology, or how we have to move forward in using the city in the right way. My presentation is divided in two parts. One, I would just put some backgrounds how my thoughts came apart, and the second one is some examples which we implemented here in Europe, of how we think this behavior can be done through interventions in the urban realm. As the title, and now I'm soon to be starting, the title of the conference is Resilient and Livable City Planning. I would rather come up with some distortion of this planning paradigm, not because I think it's wrong, but because I think it can be supplemented by a lot of things. And there also the discussion on millennials, which was run by Professor Tiwari right before me, fits quite well, because most of these projects I'm going to show you are actually done by these millennials. The last thing I wanted to say, now coming back to my starting, about the time zones, it's also a very good representation of what it actually can do to humanity, that we now manage to cooperate quite well together. Also, one like me has early morning, you have lunchtime, and as I assume Professor Tiwari is very near to taking his supper. But now let's start. So I'm going to talk about some experiments in urban innovation which we did in Europe. But I will start a little bit before. I hope so, at least. Okay, yes. Actually, I will start in Rome. This is no, Rome is very known to a lot of you, but it's also, I'm married to an Italian, so this is where my background is, and as an architect, I think there's a lot of things to investigate. But maybe, and this I'm not sure, but maybe you heard about the great fire of Rome under the Emperor Nero, which was roughly around 2000 years ago. And one of the reasons for this fire was actually the not regulation of building heights in that time, and neither was there a regulation of what kind of building materials should be used. So apart from a lot of political discussions which happened post this incident, new regulations were put into place. Some of them are still valid until today in its or in their juridical variations. But the other, and this is maybe now for us Europeans, and I think also internationally, it's one of the biggest achievement talking about architecture, was actually the development of what we now know as concrete, or the combination of bricks and concrete, which was in the 3rd century before Christ, already developed, but never really used until after this fire, when one regulation was put into place that the majority of buildings have to have the right distance and have to be using bricks and mortar because they were much more resistant to the fire. This, together with a lot of other things, led to the creation of famous buildings like the Pantheon in Rome, which is a very good expression of what architects are able to do if they have the right tools. Still, we are not, or we are quite far from where I actually want to reach, namely the behaviorism. Soon we are going to come here. This is another famous building complex in Rome. Is actually the first shopping center of the world. Is the Trojan markets. It was established by the Empire Trojan, and was consisting of a lot of shops, some of them under roof, so people could do their shopping according to their convenience. What why I tell you this is that I think now, and this now is already ongoing for some years. We're in a phase of change. You know, everyone knows, everyone realizes, is not only the pressure which is set upon us, the steadily increasing population, the climate change, and so on. It's also it's change, liberation of people's thought has put forward to question a lot of system and structures we are in, and the technological advance has not make this slower. Also, there is, as also Professor Tivari before named, there is always some limitation, some caution one has to put forward. But to come towards the end of this introduction of where we actually going in this short presentation, I will show you something completely different. It's actually the first elevator. You know, humanity very often adapted fast to things which gave them more comfort. This is actually the first known, for sure there were other similar elements, elevator, which was actually built in the palace of King Louis XV in Versailles in Paris. And was followed up with what most of you would know, and the company is still there. It's the Alaya Otis elevator, which was called the improvement in hoisting apparatus, which he was showing in the Crystal Palace exhibition in New York in 1854. These two things I was mainly talking about, the elevator and the concrete, led to architecture we know as this picture from Manhattan. So if there is, or if there would not be the possibility to construct high, and if there would not be the convenience to reach high, this would not have been possible. Now here is the first time, reflecting back also to Professor Tivari, where real estate played a great role. Since I called my lecture innovation in this practice, this was actually the first known innovation in a plan. It's the master plan for Manhattan, which was, so it's called the Commissioner's Plan. It's from 1811. innovative part of this plan actually is not the grid structure with its blocks. The innovative part in this plan is actually the mutual dependency of different blocks regarding their height, and this also led to a kind of variation in the construction. But now, as I said before, we are in a time of change. So why I show you this? So my question, and this is for sure valid for a lot of you. My question was, so if humanity is as good technological wise and design wise, is it this what we want to do with our technology? Do we want to create symbolic features? Why? In principle, there is nothing to say against them, but as we all know, we are threatened as humanity with a lot of challenges. Here, only to name one very famous visualization of the climate threat we are posing. And if we do not change our behavior, if we do not change our use of our environment, then the future will become even more predictable and even less predictable and even less convenient for us. So now, as a transition to what we try to change in this behavior stage, I will give you, since it's shortly before your lunch break, just a short thoughts. So as you know, I live in Norway. It's quite cold. So right now it's -15 outside. This usually one solves with heating. Now, you know, all the discussion about CO2 emission. So maybe wood fire heating is not the most convenient way, but the technological development leads to more and more or better efficient of these ovens, which can make it warmer. The technological development also makes us able to switch on, off, change this technological features like the heating in a much more convenient way, but also in a much more controllable way. The question I pose is if this is the only way we should trust upon, because isn't it the same way or an encounter in the middle that if you put on your sweater, then it's also solving a lot of your temperature problems. So now, until now, for sure, you're questioning yourself, so what is he actually talking about? What is he? This is a lecture in a conference for planning, and how should all this be resilient? As I said before, I very much believe in a city being resilient if the users or the citizens in the city are resilient, if they know how to use their city, if they have a possibility to engage in the city, and if they can be aware of the possibilities in the right hand. And I think it's also our responsibility as planners and architects to make this possible. So I'm talking to you about a project we were running with a lot of these millennials over the last year. It's directed by my good colleague, Professor Wellinger. Here mainly in Trondheim, but I will show you some examples also from other places in Europe. So we established an activity which is called Live Studio, which facilitates the learning process of architecture, which facilitates the use of the city, which questions known and manifested truths or rules in the city to to change for the common good. Until now, we have roughly more than 40 of these examples, which slowly increase their pace and also their size. I will show you. I will start with two very small projects. One it's called the Wave, and the other one is called the Pier. They are both. I have to go back. They are both located in this former. In this in-between space, which was formerly used to give the people access to the river where they could wash their clothes. Now, as you see, it's used, or it was used, as a parking place in the center of the city. This is a short overview of the city of Trondheim. You can see the river where it runs towards the north, and more or less in the area where you can read Nyhavna, it lefts out towards the sea. This river was actually, as you could see, I can just go back before, it was used as the harbor. So all these storage houses along the river were actually the harbor houses. So this is sky view of this city center. You can see the row of these houses along the river. As you see, in it's this place, or this in-between space is actually along one of the main streets in the city, now here indicated with this yellow line. I also have to use some touristic aspect. This is Trondheim. Usually, as all the people having been in Trondheim know, this is a once in a lifetime picture. So it's a rough environment we have here, but we appreciate the days we have. Okay, now let's come to the project. As you saw before, no, maybe did not see before, but at the back here you could see there is a height gap between the parking place and the rest of the city, a little bit up or down. And the reason is that Trondheim is not such an old city. It's only a little bit more than 1,000 years, but all the remains from the city before are under the buildings you can see there, which leads to a height difference of roughly around 4.5 meters. But so this height difference reason I told you right now, but the result of this height difference is that everything which is under here is protected under the heritage law, because there is steadily new remains from the city before coming. So the idea we had and executed by several workshops was that there should be a connection between the main street and this open space in between, as it was 1,000 or even 500 years ago. One reason why there is no connection, as I said right now, is that this area is heritage protected, and this is why it's not possible to construct upon it. So you could not create a foundation or anything like that. So what better than the use millennials brain power of doing a combined thing. And what I mean with combined thing is that one thing was the experimentation of the place. The other was to try to investigate new methods of how you could engage with people, namely by planning, constructing openly along the way. Now, I know that in a lot of countries, including Norway, in regional, the biggest problem in establishing work strategy or a work activity like this is an insurance question. And this insurance question is posed by you cannot leave your building site open because no one or it's you then as a constructor having the responsibility to come up for the damages if someone gets hurt. Now, one big difference, this is why it was very good for us to start in the Scandinavian context, is that the Scandinavian society or the Scandinavian approach to this kind of activities is different. So if a person would get hurt, the first question would be if not the person did something bad to the project. But I know that this, as an example, is something which has to be further developed, how one can distribute this responsibility. I will talk shortly about it on the next example, which was actually done in a country which has a lot which is actually the contrary of approach to this question. But where I stopped before, so this variation of doing the planning and the building on site, opening up for people passing by to involve, to make them engage with expressing their ideas, partially even helping in constructing it, gave a new ownership to this place. Now, as I said before, now you may be wondering, now I told you it's a heritage protected area and still now they are constructing. The main reason, and this is now coming back to the innovation, as I said before, like the talking we have here on the phone, is a certain type of appropriation, because the heritage law does not allow the construction of fixed installment, but this stairway or this stairway seating combined area is actually a temporary installation, and temporary installations are allowed in most of the building laws. So it's now, this is some years past. I think it's already the third time this 2-year temporary contract was prolonged by the politicians. So it's actually a good way of how to approach construction, not working against the law, but working in approaching the regulations with some appropriation. So this is actually the finalized stairways, which not only, and this is maybe the innovative part in approaching. So as I said before, it's not only connecting only the top to down, it also through this very open participative methodology. And here I have to put in something which is on my heart now, especially because we're talking about the Indian context, where in the Norwegian context, usually you have to attract people to participate. Maybe in the Indian context, you have to prevent too many people to participate, because otherwise it's getting too chaotic. But this connection of the place led to, sorry for this very fast, led to a new usage possibility of this area. So now in the summer half year, we have a market every Sunday. So it's a youth market, also run by the same people which got the ownership. So people feel that's their place suddenly, and then there is no official prohibition. So it's not forbidden to park, but there is so much activity there that people feel very uncomfortable in parking there, and so this is why they don't do it. Another thing, as I said before, so giving access to an area alone is maybe not the main attractor. Is maybe not enough to get people down there. In the same way, it was opened up to use the area as a kind of experimental area for architecture. Again, this is a combination of an old thought of, as I told you before, these warehouses are constitute the former harbor in Trondheim. Is maybe the most taken picture in the city, and to give a new possibility to take this picture, but also to establish a new end point of a kind of voyage in the city, gave even more attraction to this place before. I will now give you another example, which I think even more shows the possibilities of not regulated planning or interventions in the planning realm, not, as I said before, as a substitution, but as a supplement to the activities. It's actually called the Banja Luka Pier. So it's in Banja Luka, which is the second biggest city in Bosnia and Herzegovina, which is you can see this bigger orange dot south next to Greater Croatia. So I'm very sorry for this map. This was the only one I could get in very short time, because I realized this morning that I have to show you actually where this place is. Banja Luka is the second biggest city in Bosnia and Herzegovina. It's a city which is situated along the river. As you can see in this small cut north, they have a kind of there's a castle which is a tourist attraction, but actually we're talking about the area on the south side of this river. So along this river, people all along the time made their appropriations by themselves to get access to the river. As you know, sweet water always was and is a big attractor. This is what the people did. What, on the other hand, happens very often if people do things on their own, if they appropriate themselves, they also use it often in ways which are not to be too moralistic, which are not the best ones. So the best ones. So there is a lot of drinking going on along this river, because it's kind of these hidden spaces. Again, the question was how one could attract or make this area attractive again for all the people living in the area. We were actually constituting several workshops. We wanted to implement things one-to-one, and this we wanted to do by contributing to a sustainable future by fostering attitudes of the people doing it, but also attitudes of the people using it. And in the investigation we try to generate knowledge and modes of how this could work in the right way. So we did several workshops co-involving people. You know, the nowadays problem in showing picture of workshop with people is that privacy law prevent me of showing you a picture of these workshops, but we also did experiments and started to construct. So I will use this picture here to tell you a little bit about the challenges. Now, this is not a funny weekend activity of some young millennials and maybe not too old professor. We actually had a lot of challenges coming back to how this fits into regulations. This is along the riverside. The riverside has flooding problems. So if you construct something there, there has to be a building application. The question is, if you have a building application, who is going to do it? So if it's an architecture office, then it's them together with the municipality at the end, which will have their responsibility. But if you want to have this bottom-up activity or this people-driven activity, is very difficult to get the activity recognized as a legal partner. So for this, we had to have a lot of goodwill. We were working a lot on the political stage as well to get the main politicians to support us. When it actually started, we started it in the same way as we did the stairs. You start designing not only in the workshop before, but the same people which gathered in the workshop, they saw that something different is happening. It took several days where they could visit us and work together with us. So in the moment we ordered the material, which partially was sponsored, which partially even was paid by the municipality, we did not 100% know where, in which direction we are going. What we knew is that we will have some foundations along the river, which can help us to keep this in place. And alongside this several weeks of activity, we established very good connections to the people, and they again established very good ownership, or they got ownership to the area and dared to come back. I was jumping too fast. So this pier actually also got to be a pier because it supports this very active boat driving along the river, which should get a kind of landing stage where this traditional heritage of driving this very Venetian gondola-like boats, only that here the water upstream, if you row upstream or if you push yourself upstream, you need quite some power. But this is a very traditional activity, and we also wanted to support this, also to give the people involved and the people living at the area, and which regained their area even more what's called more reason why they should do it. So at the end, we had this 10-day lasting workshop where the place was constructed all along with people which were living there, partially some students, partially passers-by, which helped in constructing. Still, as I said before, the biggest challenge of here was a kind of insurance discussion. So passers-by were, for example, not allowed to use the saw, but this is a small discussion, so it's actually not about it, not about this in this lecture, which ended up with a quite decent platform. But, and this is maybe the most important thing, this is not about the platform. It's not about the architecture quality or the missing thereof in this platform. It's about the method and the implementation along with the local participants. I think the next slide will show you best, or will not show you, but I can tell you best what actually was the main achievement of this project. You see this basketball net. So this basketball net was destroyed when we came there, and this regain of ownership of this place from being obsolete, not used area, made two locals repair this net on their own will in the night. So not waiting. This is a municipal area, so not waiting for the municipality to do it, but they solved it by themselves. And this ended up with people using it directly the next day. So what actually is the essence of this very short introduction? As I said before, I think that a resilient and livable cities we can only get if we have resilient citizens, which are parts of creating their livable area. For this, they also need ownership, so they need to be involved in these activities and or in the development activities. And this they also need to do, as I said before, not as substitution, but as a supplement to the planning. This example from the river in Banja Luka and also in Trondheim led to a lot of other activity. This was, for example, the regaining of public space in the night where it was dark, it was not safe, only by establishing a light installation. Also, this result of several steps, workshop, including local. So it's on the verge between the planned and unplanned. If you're interested in more of this project, and there is a lot of this project, the webpage is called ntnulifestudio.org. It would be a pleasure if you take a look or send us possible questions you have. I am very aware that this presentation was maybe not what you expected, maybe a little bit off the track, but I hope that it could give you some disruption of mainstream thoughts. Thank you very much for me now, and I'm looking forward to follow your conference for the next days. Thank you.
For the very interesting presentation and keynote address. And I get reminded of the book Small is Beautiful by Schumacher, which in Scandinavia as well as in Europe, this is so important to engage with the citizens. And most of the cases which you are showing, it may look trivial, but it actually engages the citizen and builds these spaces, which is so central to livability and resilience, the two themes of our conference. So thank you very much for giving us your time. Thank you also to the other keynote, the first keynote speaker, Professor Dr. Tiwari. And with this, we have our keynote session ending. Would you like to have any comments from the dais? I guess we will break for lunch, and post lunch we have the parallel sessions coming up. So I request the keynote speakers, if you have time, please join us on any of the sessions, so as to hear the deliberations. Thank you so much, one and all. We shall break now, and post lunch the links have already been shared. It's on a different platform in Google. Thank you again. Thank you, Marcus, very much. We would be sending you, you as well as Professor Dr. Tiwari, the proceedings as well as few other items on the post valedictory by post. Thank you.